Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
How much I'm fed up with all of this, he said, looking disgustedly at his dying wife. He went to her best friend, and when, a year later, he decided to return, a big surprise awaited him. Welcome to our channel. If you like our story, don't forget to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. Thank you for your support, and we wish you a pleasant listening experience. Pablo stood at the entrance of the rehabilitation clinic, gripping a bouquet of white lilies. His graying temples and deep shadows under his eyes had aged him by a good decade. The hand reaching for the door handle trembled. A year. A whole year had passed. Images flashed before his eyes, the sunny apartment, laughter, plans for the future, Patagonia, which they never saw, the ring box for their 5th anniversary that he never gave her, the names of children they had planned to have later. A year ago, their apartment was always filled with sunlight in the mornings. Marina would open the windows, letting in the spring air and the sounds of Buenos Aires waking up, singing along to modern hits while the water splashed in the shower. "You're late today," Pablo called from behind the drafting table where he was finalizing a project for a new shopping center. "Children's group?" Marina appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a towel, her hair still wet from the shower. Droplets ran down her neck to her collarbones. "Yeah, 12 little ones eager to conquer Aconcagua," she laughed, shaking her short haircut. "How do you like the new color?" Pablo broke away from the drawings and smiled. "It suits you. Actually, everything suits you." She approached, hugged him from behind, leaving a damp spot on his shirt. "Have I told you that you're the best husband in the world?" "Not today." He pulled her closer and kissed her. "Will you come tomorrow to see my demonstration class? There will be journalists from Deportes Extremos." "Of course. I'm proud of you." This was their usual life, dynamic, full of plans. 2 weeks ago, they had bought tickets for autumn in Patagonia. Marina had long dreamed of seeing the real Andes. New hiking boots stood in the hallway, and in their bedroom, a world map hung on the wall, marked with red flags for places they had visited and blue flags for places they still had to conquer. The doorbell rang at exactly 11. "Open the door, it's probably Katha." Marina shouted from the kitchen, where she was preparing their favorite Saturday dish, locro. On the doorstep stood not only Katha but also Dolores, Pablo's mother, a poised woman with perfect hair and a scrutinizing look. "Mom? You didn't warn me you were coming," Pablo said, taken aback. "I was nearby and decided to stop by. I can't call every time I want to see my son." She walked into the apartment, casting a critical glance at the creative mess, the scattered sketches, sneakers in the hallway, and an unfinished book on the armrest of the couch. Catalina, a bright brunette with long hair and expressive eyes, smiled awkwardly. "Hello, sorry, I didn't know." "It's fine, come in." Pablo hugged his wife's friend. From the kitchen, Marina peeked out, and for a moment, her smile faltered. "Dolores, what a surprise. We're having locro for lunch." "I'm not hungry, dear," the mother-in-law replied coldly, "and all these spices are bad for your stomach." At lunch, Dolores asked her son about work, pointedly ignoring Marina's talk about the new insurance system for the climbing gym. When Marina mentioned their plans for Patagonia, the mother-in-law pursed her lips. "At your age, it's time to think about children, not mountains. After 30, it gets harder for a woman." "Mom," Pablo began, but Marina gently touched his hand. "We have a plan, Dolores. First Patagonia, then children. Everything in its time." Dolores gave a meaningful look at her son. "See how she's postponing it. She'll never give you children." She had always known how to speak with her eyes, a talent passed down from her own mother-in-law, the silent but all-powerful matriarch of the family. "Another year or two of this first then, and it will be too late," she thought, cutting the locro into small pieces. "And my Pablito deserves a normal family, not this, rock climbing." Marina caught that look and tensed internally. She knew what her mother-in-law was thinking. Those thoughts hung in the air like invisible dust, but they were sharply perceptible. "I'm not against children," Marina thought, "but on my terms and in my time." I won't have a child just because someone thinks it's time. I still have so many plans, so many peaks to conquer. Catalina, sensing the tension, steered the conversation away. Marina works wonderfully with the kids at the climbing gym. You should see how much they love her. Training other people's kids and raising your own are not the same thing, Dolores retorted, mentally adding, and when will my son finally understand that? After lunch, when Dolores went to the restroom, Marina whispered to her husband, "Your mom will never accept that I don't meet her idea of the perfect daughter-in-law. She's just old-fashioned," Pablo sighed. For her, a woman is home, family, children. And not some extreme woman who climbs rocks, Marina finished for him. "I love you just as you are," he kissed her on the forehead. "I know," she smiled, but there was a flicker of worry in her eyes. That day, the climbing gym was full of kids. Instructors shouted, music played, and the bright holes on the walls created the impression of a playground. "Rodrigo, remember the 3 points of support," Marina belayed a 10-year-old boy confidently climbing a nearly vertical wall. "Well done," she said, while a newcomer, a middle-aged man, nervously shuffled at the neighboring route. "Don't worry, Mr. Garcia," Marina encouraged him. "We have reliable insurance. Even if you fall, it'll be like on a trampoline." Marina was in her element. Every movement was calculated, every belay double-checked. Colleagues respected her professionalism, beginners felt safe under her guidance, and the kids simply adored Aunt Marina, who could be strict when necessary, praise at the right time, and teach them how to overcome fear. "Honestly, I already regret arguing with my colleagues," the man mumbled, trying to find a foothold for his foot. "You're doing great," Marina smiled, giving the newcomer an advance of confidence. "Most people are scared at first, but then they get used to it. I was scared of heights too, can you imagine?" She checked the carabiners, making sure the rope was threaded correctly. Something caught her attention, a little wear on one of the slings, but the strap seemed strong enough. "I'll replace it after this climb," she thought and continued belaying. "Everything will be fine." Statistically, climbing is safer than crossing the road and she didn't finish her sentence. The sound of the belay snapping was barely audible above the music, a faint crack, like fabric tearing. Time slowed. Marina saw the terrified eyes of the falling man, his hands instinctively trying to grab something. Without hesitation, she rushed forward, trying to soften his fall, grabbed the snapped belay. 110 kilos of living weight came crashing down on her, knocking her off her feet. A sharp pain shot through her spine as she fell onto her back, and the man and metal equipment fell on top of her. The last thing she heard was someone scream and the sound of a siren. Then, darkness enveloped her like a black blanket. Hospital corridors always seemed too bright to Pablo. White walls, white coats, sterile light highlighting the pallor of faces and the fatigue in their eyes. The smell of antiseptic overpowered all other smells of life. Pablo hated hospitals, and now, it seemed, this sterile hell had become his new reality. Spinal fracture in the thoracic section, damage to Th8, Th9, the doctor spoke slowly, tracing the area on his back with his hands. A complete spinal cord rupture is unlikely, but the compression is serious. Surgery will be needed to stabilize the vertebrae, possibly more than one. Pablo listened, grabbing onto certain phrases like a lifeline: "There's hope, modern techniques, chances for recovery." But behind them lurked other, more terrifying words: paralysis of the lower limbs, long rehabilitation, disability. "What are the chances that she will walk again?" he asked, feeling the scratch in his throat. The doctor took off his glasses and cleaned them, as if giving himself time to formulate his response. In such cases, it's difficult to give predictions. Much depends on the nature of the injury, the success of the surgery, and the individual characteristics of the body. He paused. "But I must be honest with you, full recovery is unlikely. We will fight for every centimeter of mobility, but prepare yourself for the fact that rehabilitation will take months, possibly years." "And what about sensation? Will she be able to feel her legs?" "We don't know that yet. We need to wait for her to regain consciousness and conduct a series of tests." "When will she regain consciousness?" was all he could ask further. Soon. We are keeping her under sedation because of the pain, but tomorrow you will be able to talk to her. Athletes' endurance sometimes works miracles, don't lose hope. The doctor's office, cold and businesslike, suddenly felt like a capsule cut off from the real world. In this world, his wife had just been conducting a training session, laughing, making plans, while in this capsule, she was a patient with a spinal injury and an uncertain prognosis. Catalina sat in the hallway, hugging herself as if she were freezing. Her eyes were red from tears. What did they say? She jumped up when she saw Pablo. She will survive, he answered hoarsely. And what then? It's unclear. Spinal fracture. Possibly. He couldn't say the word paralysis. Catalina closed her mouth with her hand, holding back sobs. They stood in that faceless hallway, not knowing what to say to each other. Dolores appeared an hour later, her hair perfectly styled, dressed in a strict suit as if for a business meeting. In her hands, a bag of fruits and juices. My poor boy, she hugged her son. I told you, all these extreme hobbies of hers would lead to nothing good. And now, thought Dolores, she won't only fail to give him children, but she will also become like a child herself, helpless, requiring care. My son deserves better. He shouldn't bury his life caring for a disabled person. The thought was terrible, but she couldn't suppress it. Pablo pulled away. Mom, not now. Of course, dear. I just want you to know, whatever happens, I'm here. Her voice held sincere concern, but somewhere deep down, Pablo sensed other notes, as if she had received confirmation of her long-held fears. That night, he sat by his wife's bed, holding her limp hand in his. Marina looked small and fragile amidst the hospital tubes and wires. On the monitor, a rhythmic pulse line beat, the only evidence that life was continuing. Just yesterday, this hand had held a climbing rope tightly, these fingers had drummed on the table to the beat of her favorite song. Now they were lifeless, with bluish nails and pale skin. Hello, hero, a quiet voice came from the door. It was Catalina with a thermos of coffee. You need to sleep. I'll stay with her. I can't leave her, Pablo shook his head. What if she wakes up and doesn't see me? She might think. That you abandoned her? Catalina smiled faintly. Marina would never think that. She knows how much you love her. Pablo squeezed his wife's hand tighter. We had so many plans. Patagonia this fall, a new apartment next year, maybe a child after that, his voice faltered, and now I don't even know if she'll be able to. Hey, Catalina put a hand on his shoulder. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. But today she's alive, and you're here. That's the most important thing. When Catalina left, Pablo was once again alone with the steady beeping of the machines and his thoughts. He stroked Marina's palm and whispered, Everything will be fine, you hear me? We'll manage. I'm with you. We'll still climb Aconcagua, I promise. Just come back to me. An elderly woman groaned in the neighboring bed. Rain began outside the window. Drops drummed on the glass, creating a strange, almost soothing rhythm. Later, wrapped in the hospital blanket, he sat in the chair next to his wife's bed and almost dozed off when his phone vibrated with a message. Dolores, dear, I've arranged for the best neurosurgeon in the city. I called a contact in the ministry. Dr. Morales will see Marina tomorrow. Everything will be fine. Thank you, Mom, he replied. Now he was grateful for her connections and persistence. He couldn't have known then that this persistence would one day play a fateful role in their lives. He couldn't have known that this day would become a watershed in their lives, dividing them into before and after, that long months of struggle, despair, hope, and a soul-crushing choice lay ahead. That one day, he would say those terrible words he would regret every day. That one day, he would stand before the clinic door, holding flowers in his hands, with a single thought, will she ever forgive me? That night, he simply sat by her side, believing that love could heal any wounds, that this trial would only strengthen their bond, that he would cope. But sometimes even love needs an oxygen mask to breathe. 3 months later, Their apartment turned into something between a hospital room and a warehouse for medical equipment. A functional bed with a remote control took center stage in the bedroom, replacing their previous double bed with a soft headboard where they once lay with a laptop, planning their trips. Marina's hiking clothes, bright t-shirts, and sports pants were replaced by shelves filled with diapers, pads, and medicines. Pablo woke to the sharp beeping of the machine. The clock read 4:17. He jumped up automatically, checking the catheter and 4. "Are you okay?" he asked, leaning toward his wife's pale face. Marina stared at the ceiling with an unfocused gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Sorry for waking you," she said with difficulty. "I think the 4 is empty." Pablo checked. Indeed, the nutrient bag had emptied. He quickly replaced it, checked all the tubes, and smeared Marina's lips with balm. "Do you want some water?" "A little." He gently lifted her head, brought a glass of water with a straw. Their daily, or rather, nightly ritual. A memory flashed in his mind, Marina handing him a bottle of water after a run in Palermo Park, her laughing eyes, sweat droplets on her tanned neck. "I'll try to sleep," he stroked her short hair, which had grown out after the hospital cut. "It's still early." "And you?" "I'll sleep too," he lied. Marina knew he was lying but pretended to believe him. The morphine and muscle relaxants were starting to take effect, sinking her into a drowsy haze. She dreamed of mountains, snow, the freedom to move, and the pain of waking up. Pablo quietly walked to the kitchen. The mountain of dirty dishes in the sink, boxes from food delivery, empty coffee cups, traces of yesterday's day, which looked like the day before and the day after. He turned on the kettle and looked out the window. A gray dawn over the city, people rushing to work, ordinary life continued out there, outside. His phone vibrated. A message from his boss: "Pablo, we urgently need the sketches for the San Telmo project. You haven't sent reports for the 3rd week. I understand your situation, but business is business." Pablo turned off the phone without finishing reading. In front of him lay an unfinished sketch, started the night before. The lines blurred before his eyes from lack of sleep. He couldn't focus for more than 15 minutes at a time. His mind felt like it was being pulled into the fog of exhaustion. Once, work had been his passion. The doorbell rang at exactly 8. The visiting nurse, Consuelo, a full-figured woman with kind eyes and strong hands, was skilled at turning Marina with surprising gentleness. "Good morning, Mr. Pablo. How is our patient? Did she have a good night?" He shrugged. They changed the 4 at 4. Consuelo briskly walked into the room, and soon, her cheerful voice and Marina's quiet responses were heard. Pablo stayed in the kitchen, aimlessly rearranging papers. Should I call my boss? Ask for another extension? Maybe just quit? But then, how would we live? Treatment, medicines, the visiting nurse. Marina's insurance only covered part of the expenses, and her sick leave had long expired. Today, we've gained some color, a good sign. Consuelo appeared in the kitchen an hour later, drying her hands with a towel. I think we can try sitting Marina in a chair for half an hour a day. I'll bring a special corset next time. And, Mr. Pablo, you should get some sleep. You've got panda circles under your eyes. Pablo weakly smiled. Thanks, Consuelo. I'm fine. None of us is fine, she patted him on the shoulder. But we'll manage. Marina's making good progress, trust my experience. I won't be able to come tonight, my daughter has her graduation. Maybe you can call someone to substitute. After Consuelo left, Pablo called Katha. She came to help twice a week, the only one of their friends who hadn't disappeared after the accident. Of course, I'll come, she said. Just around 7, after work. I can stay the night if needed. Pablo sighed with relief. Thanks, you're a real friend. Is everything okay with Marina? Consuelo says there's progress. Maybe soon we'll start sitting her in a chair. There was a pause, then Katha quietly asked. And how about you? The question caught him off guard. No one had ever asked how he was. Everyone asked about Marina. I'm holding on, he squeezed out. Pablo, if you need to talk, just call me, okay? Something in her voice made his throat tighten. Thanks, Katha. See you tonight. The day stretched out in its usual rhythm. Dressing changes, spoon-feeding pureed food, Marina could swallow, but her hands wouldn't obey. Rubbing with alcohol solution, a set of exercises to prevent bed sores, checking the catheter, measuring blood pressure. Between procedures, attempts to work, interrupted by Marina calling for him. By evening, an exhausted Pablo sank onto the sofa in the living room and closed his eyes for literally 5 minutes. He didn't notice how he fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. He woke up to voices in the bedroom. The clock showed 20:34. He had slept for almost 3 hours. Catalina, she was supposed to come at 7. Pablo quickly got up and headed for the bedroom, but stopped when he heard his mother's voice. You see, Marinita, your son needs to work. Dolores's voice was persuasive. He's a talented architect. He has a great future. But how can he build a career if he has to be here around the clock? A pause. Pablo didn't hear Marina's answer. I'm offering an excellent option, Dolores continued. A private boarding house outside the city. It will be more expensive, of course, but I'll help with the payment. They have wonderful specialists, the best equipment. And Pablito can visit you every weekend. Pablo burst into the room. Mom, what are you doing? Dolores flinched. Pablito. Aren't you sleeping? I just stopped by to visit, and there was no one here. Marina was alone, without supervision. Cada was supposed to come, Pablo muttered. Ah, you're Catalina, his mother waved it off. Can you rely on her? I rang the doorbell for 10 minutes, then opened it with my key. With your key? Where did you get a key? You gave me a spare, remember? After you lost yours last year, she smiled at Marina. Well, I'll go. Think about my offer, it's for your own good. When Dolores closed the door behind her, Pablo sank onto the edge of the bed and took Marina's hand. I'm sorry. I didn't know she was coming. Marina looked out the window, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She's right, Pash, she said quietly, this can't go on. You're killing yourself. Don't even talk about it, he kissed her fingers. I'm not letting you go anywhere. The doorbell interrupted their conversation. It was Catalina, out of breath, with grocery bags. Sorry I'm late. Work was hectic, then traffic. She trailed off when she saw their expressions. Is something wrong? My mother came, Pablo answered briefly. She suggested sending Marina to a boarding house. Catalina set the bags on the floor. What? That's... How could she? Forget it, Pablo said tiredly. It's not happening. While Catalina unpacked the groceries in the kitchen, Pablo sat next to Marina, silently looking out the window. Numbers were spinning in his head, medical bills, mortgage payments, fees for projects he hadn't finished. Part of his mind distantly noted that his mother had a point. He really couldn't balance caring for Marina and working. Do you want me to stay the night? Catalina asked, peeking into the room. You could sleep properly. Marina smiled weakly. Stay, Kata. He needs to rest. Pablo wanted to object, but fatigue hit him like a wave. If you really don't mind? Of course not. Catalina stood next to him, putting a hand on his shoulder. Go to your office, sleep on the couch. And we'll have a girls' night, right? Marina nodded, and something in her eyes softened. Gratitude? Relief? Pablo couldn't decipher the look. The next morning, he woke up feeling rested for the first time in a long while. The sun was already up, the clock read just past 9. He jumped up, so late, Marina, the medicine. In the bedroom, he found an idyllic scene, Catalina in one of Pablo's t-shirts, brushing Marina's damp hair while Marina half lay on the pillows, rosy after her morning wash. Good morning, sleepyhead, Catalina smiled. We've already had breakfast, All the medicine has been taken, the IV's been set. You managed all by yourself? Pablo exclaimed. Turns out I learned quickly, she winked at Marina. And I made arrangements with Consuelo. She'll come a little earlier today and bring a special corset so we can sit Marina in a chair. Marina looked lively. Can you imagine, Pash? I'll be able to sit by the window. It'll be like a breath of freedom. It's wonderful. He smiled, feeling a pang of guilt that he couldn't bring that joy to her eyes himself. Thank you, Kadot. Seriously, you've really helped us. Always happy to help, she gathered her things. I've got to get to work, but I can come by tonight if you need me. No, I'll manage, Pablo said hastily. You've got your own life. Catalina paused in the doorway, as if she wanted to say something but changed her mind. Well, see you tomorrow. I still need to pick up the pills they prescribed for you. After she left, Pablo sat on the edge of the bed. I'm glad you're feeling better. Marina smiled weakly. Just a good day. They happen. A pause hung between them, filled with unspoken words. Finally, Pablo spoke up. Did you ever think about what Mom suggested? Marina stared out the window for a long time before answering. I've thought about it. And I keep thinking about it. Not about the specific boarding house, but about the situation in general. I don't want to send you anywhere. I know, she tried to squeeze his hand, but her fingers barely moved. But I see what's happening to you. You're fading, Pash. Day by day. It's temporary. Don't fool yourself, her voice took on a steel edge, reminding him of the old Marina. We both know my condition isn't going to last a week or a month. It might be permanent. Marin. I spoke to the doctor when you went out, she looked him in the eye. He said that the sensation is unlikely to return. Darling, I can't even go to the bathroom by myself. This is going to go on for years. Are you ready for that? The question hung in the air. Pablo suddenly felt small and helpless. I love you, was all he could say. And I love you. That's why I don't want to be your burden. At that moment, the phone rang. It's the boss. Sorry, I have to answer. Pablo left the room. The conversation was brief and to the point. Either he returns to full-time work within the week, or the company will terminate the contract. We've held on as long as we could, Pablo, but the deadlines are critical. We need an architect full-time. When he returned to the bedroom, Marina pretended to be dozing. He quietly sat in the chair by the window, staring at the passing cars below, at the people rushing to their business, at the pigeons pecking at bread on the neighboring building's windowsill. Ordinary life flowed on, while their life had frozen in this room, with its smell of medicine and the quiet beeping of medical devices. In the evening, when the sun was setting, Pablo moved Marina into a wheelchair with a high backrest and a blanket on her lap. She felt so light. Her muscles had atrophied, leaving only skin and bones. Thank you, she whispered when he set the chair by the window. I can see the sunset from here. He knelt beside the chair and took her hands in his. I'll find a way, I promise. We'll manage. She smiled faintly, but her eyes were filled with tears. Of course, darling. We always manage. That night, waking up from the beeping of the 4, Pablo went to the computer and opened the website for the Miraflores boarding house for the first time. Shiny hallways, smiling nurses, rooms with park views. He closed the page before he could read the prices. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Maybe this would be better for everyone. It was almost 10 o'clock in the evening when Dolores opened the door to her apartment to an unexpected guest. Catalina, she was surprised, giving the girl a scrutinizing look. Did something happen to Pablito? No, Catalina shifted nervously on the doorstep. Can I come in? I need to talk to you. Dolores's apartment always impressed with its impeccable order, perfectly arranged furniture, no dust on the polished surfaces, paintings and strict frames. On the walls were photos of Pablo at different ages. There he is as a graduate, there receiving his diploma, and there in front of his first architectural project. Marina was barely visible in these photos, as if the daughter-in-law had been a mere guest in the family's life. Tea? Coffee? The hostess asked businesslike as she seated the guest in the living room. Thanks, I don't need anything. Catalina nervously clasped her fingers. I'll be brief. I wanted to talk about Pablo and Marina. Dolores sat down across from her, hands folded on her lap. I'm listening. You suggested sending Marina to a boarding house. Yes, and I believe it's the only reasonable option, the woman said firmly. My son is ruining his life, his career, his health. He's a talented architect, he had a brilliant future. And now he's become a caretaker who sleeps only 3 hours a night. Have you seen his eyes? His hands, which used to create beautiful projects, now shake from exhaustion. I understand your concern, Catalina began cautiously, but Marina is his wife. He loves her. Loves her? Dolores smiled bitterly. Of course, he loves her. And what has that love brought him? She was never a match for my son, with her mountains and extreme hobbies. Now, he will bury himself completely next to her. She stood up and walked over to a photo of her son on the wall. Look at him. Handsome, smart, promising. Doesn't he deserve a better life? Does Marina deserve such treatment? Catalina wanted to ask, but remained silent. Instead, she said, I came because I think you're right. Dolores abruptly turned to her. What? I see how Pablo is wearing himself out. I see him fading away. And Marina sees it too. Catalina lowered her head. She says herself that she doesn't want to be his burden. Dolores slowly returned to her chair, studying the girl's face carefully. Why does this concern you so much, Catalina? An awkward silence hung between them. She's my friend, Catalina finally spoke, her voice trembling. I just want what's best for both of them. You're in love with my son. It wasn't a question but a statement. How long has this been going on? Catalina felt the color rise to her cheeks. It doesn't matter. I never. It matters a lot, Dolores interrupted, leaning forward. If you truly love Pablo, you should help him. Save him from this sacrifice. What do you mean? He needs support. Understanding. Someone to talk to. A shoulder to lean on. I help as much as I can, Catalina replied confusedly. That's not enough, Dolores lowered her voice as if sharing a secret. He needs to see an alternative. To understand that life isn't over. That he can still be happy. You're suggesting I seduce Pablo? Catalina jumped up, outraged. How can you say that? He's my best friend's husband. I'm suggesting you be there when he needs warmth, the woman replied calmly, and he will need it very soon. Men are not made to live with disabled wives, dear. Sooner or later, he will break. And then what? Who will pick up the pieces? Catalina shook her head. That's wrong. What's right about a young, strong man burying himself alive? What's right about a talented architect turning into a caretaker? I've read the statistics, Catalina. 80% of husbands leave their disabled wives. It's the cruel truth of life. My Pablito is just too decent to admit the obvious to himself. Catalina remained silent, battling conflicting emotions. Think about it, Dolores finished softly. You could give him what Marina will never be able to. A normal family. Children. A future. The next morning, Dolores arrived at her son's apartment with a large bag of groceries. I brought homemade empanadas, she announced as she entered. You have nothing in the fridge. Pablo, unshaven, his eyes red from lack of sleep, nodded. Thanks, Mom. I just fed Marina, she's dozing. That's good, Dolores said decisively, heading straight for the kitchen. Now, you and I need to talk. On the table, empanadas, salad, and a bottle of good red wine from Mendoza appeared. Wine? Pablo was surprised. At this hour? You need to relax, son. You look terrible. She poured a glass and pushed it toward him. Go on, at least distract yourself a little. Despite his usual resistance, Pablo didn't argue. The wine pleasantly burned his throat, spreading warmth through his body. The tension of the past weeks began to ease a little. You're right to hold on, his mother said, looking at him with sympathy. You're a good man, Pablito. But you can't be good at the cost of your own life. I'm not leaving her, if that's what you mean, he responded tiredly. Of course not, Dolores quickly agreed. I'm talking about organizing professional care. You need a break. You're on the edge. With those circles under your eyes, they'll soon put you in the hospital too. Pablo drank the wine in silence. His head was buzzing either from the alcohol on an empty stomach or from the accumulated exhaustion. I've contacted the director of the boarding house. They're ready to take Marina anytime. They have wonderful facilities, she casually remarked. The first month, I'll pay for it myself as a gift. Mom, he grimaced. I'm not sending my wife to a hospice. It's not a hospice, it's a modern medical center, Dolores retorted. Look, see for yourself. She pulled out a glossy brochure. Private rooms with all amenities, 24-hour care, physiotherapy, massage. I've already seen their website, Pablo admitted. But this isn't the solution. Then what's the solution? His mother's voice grew sharper. To destroy yourself? Lose your job? Be left without any means of support? How will you treat Marina if they fire you? He lowered his head. I don't know. I don't know. His mother covered his hand with hers. Son, you're not betraying her. You're just acknowledging that there are things beyond your strength. It's not shameful. At that moment, the doorbell rang. It's probably Catalina. Pablo got up. She promised to bring the medication. Catalina did indeed arrive with a pharmacy bag, but her gaze was oddly dim, her movements stiff. Come in, Pablo invited her. Mom's here, we're in the kitchen. Hello, Dolores, Catalina nodded, avoiding looking the woman in the eye. How's work? Dolores politely asked. It's fine. Lots of new orders, Catalina faltered. Pash, you need to sign the prescription for the new painkiller. Here, she handed him the paper. Their fingers brushed, and Pablo felt a shiver run through his body. When was the last time he felt something like that? It seemed like an eternity ago. An awkward moment was interrupted by a sharp cry from the bedroom. Pablo! Pablo, help! They rushed toward the call. Marina was lying, her pale fingers clutching the sheet, her face twisted with pain. What happened? He leaned over her. My back. I think the stitch is inflamed, her voice cracked. Please, call the doctor. Catalina quickly approached the bedside table. I'll get the painkiller first. I'll do it, Pablo almost shouted, pushing her hand away. Exhaustion, stress, wine, everything mixed together, overflowing his patience. The next 2 hours passed in a blur. The doctor's arrival, the examination, new prescriptions, an injection. Finally, Marina fell asleep, and a weary Pablo walked into the living room where his mother and Catalina were waiting. Everything's okay? Catalina asked. It's an inflammation. The doctor prescribed a new course of antibiotics. He sank heavily into the chair. Another complication. You need to sleep, Catalina said gently. I can stay and sit with her. No, we'll manage, Dolores intervened. You have work tomorrow, Catalina. Go home. Catalina gave Pablo a quick look, but he was staring at the floor. Okay. Then, see you tomorrow. She left uncertainly, and Dolores firmly closed the door behind her and turned to her son. Go rest. I'll stay with Marina. Thank you, he smiled weakly. I'm really tired, and just before entering the bedroom, Pablo turned back. Mom, what's going on between you and Katat? There's some tension? Nonsense, Dolores waved it off. We're just all tired. Go to sleep. 3 days later, around noon, Dolores silently entered the bedroom where Marina was half lying with a book, struggling to hold it with her weak fingers. Hello, Marinita, her mother-in-law greeted her kindly. How are you feeling? Thank you, better, Marina replied wearily, putting the book aside. Pablo at work? There was relief in Dolores's voice. Yes, I insisted he go to the office. He needs to keep his job. Dolores sat down on the edge of the bed. We need to talk, dear. Marina tensed. I'm listening. You know, I didn't understand for a long time why my son chose you, Dolores began, examining her perfect manicure. You're so not domestic. Always in the mountains, climbing. What future could you give him? Dolores. Let me finish, the woman said firmly. But now I see I was wrong. You're strong. And you truly love him. Marina looked at her mother-in-law in disbelief. What are you getting at? What I'm getting at is that if you truly love my son, you need to let him go. A heavy silence hung in the air. Finally, Marina spoke in a quiet but firm voice. Leave. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Leave my room. Dolores sighed. Okay. But think about what I said. You're going to turn his life into hell. He'll never leave you himself. He's too decent. But you can free him. When the door closed behind Dolores, Marina painfully reached for the phone. Dialing the number with her uncooperative fingers was difficult, but she managed. Kata? I need to talk to you. Urgently. By evening, Pablo returned home from work, exhausted, but with a spark of hope in his eyes. Guess what? The boss gave me another chance, he kissed his wife's forehead. A hotel complex project in Mar del Plata. If I manage it, they won't fire me. That's wonderful, Marina smiled weakly. I'll work at night, and during the day, Mom promised to help, he said, almost cheerfully. We'll manage, darling. Marina looked at her husband for a long time, as if absorbing every detail of his face. Could you please set my chair by the window? I want to watch the sunset. He carefully moved her into the wheelchair and wrapped a blanket around her legs. You seem a bit quiet today, he noticed. Is everything okay? Yes, just been thinking a lot, she looked at the orange sky. What a beautiful sunset. Do you remember, we watched the same one in Bariloche, on the mountain? Of course, he smiled at the memory. You said back then that you'd never be a boring housewife, making locro, that we'd climb a new peak every year. I'm sorry for how things turned out, she lowered her eyes. Hey, it's not your fault, he sat next to her, taking her hand. Accidents can happen to anyone. You know what the scariest part is, she suddenly asked. When your body is here, but your soul is somewhere else, in the mountains, in the sky. And that split is unbearable. Marin. No, let me finish. I look at you, and I see you fading away. Day by day. This routine, these procedures, it's a cage we're both in. You deserve more, Pash. Stop, he embraced her shoulders. Let's not talk about this now. Then, her voice took on a hard edge. When you get fired. When we sink into debt. When you start hating me. I would never. Don't lie to yourself, she looked him directly in the eye. You're 32. Your whole life is ahead of you. And me? I'm not the woman you married anymore. And I never will be. The doorbell rang. Pablo, relieved, went to open it. The conversation was taking too heavy a turn. At the door stood Catalina with a bottle of wine and a bag of groceries. Hello, she smiled. I decided to stop by, check on you. The evening felt strange. The three of them had dinner in the living room. Marina sat in her chair, Pablo and Catalina on the couch. The conversation didn't flow, awkward silences appeared. Catalina kept glancing at Marina with guilty eyes, and Marina nodded, as though they were having a silent dialogue. At one point, after the second glass of wine, Pablo suddenly laughed at a joke Catalina told. And that sound, genuine laughter, which hadn't been heard in their house for many months, seemed to explode in the room. "I'm tired," Marina suddenly announced. "Pablo, please take me to bed." When he returned to the living room, Catalina was clearing the dishes. "Do you need help?" he asked. "Sit down, relax," she smiled. "I'll manage on my own." They were left alone in the kitchen. The dishwasher hummed quietly, and the lights of nighttime Buenos Aires flickered outside the window. "Thank you," Pablo suddenly said. "For everything. I don't know what we'd do without you." "It's nothing," she shrugged. "It's much harder for you and Marina." "It's hard for all of us," he looked her in the eyes. "But you're the only one who's here, who understands, who doesn't judge." She suddenly appeared much closer, her eyes gleaming either from wine or tears. "Pablo, What happened next seemed to happen beyond their will." His hand on her waist, her palm on his cheek, a brief, almost chaste touch of lips that suddenly turned into a desperate, hungry kiss. They both pulled back at the same time, realizing what had just happened. "Sorry, I shouldn't have," Catalina mumbled, grabbing her purse. "I need to go." Pablo stood there, stunned by what had happened and his own reaction. For the first time in months, he felt alive, desired, free. And that freedom both attracted and scared him. When the door closed behind Catalina, he walked into the bedroom. Marina lay with her eyes closed, but he knew she wasn't asleep. "Have a drink with me," his voice sounded oddly distant. "What?" She opened her eyes. He handed her a glass of wine, bringing it to her lips. "Drink. We need to talk." She took a sip, never taking her eyes off him. "I can't do this anymore," he slowly said, setting the glass aside. "I'm suffocating, Marina. I feel like I'm drowning." Deep inside, this decision had been brewing since the moment he first opened the boarding house website, from every unfinished project, from every sleepless night. The kiss with Catalina had only crystallized what he had been afraid to admit, even to himself. He couldn't handle it anymore. And he didn't want to. "I know," she replied quietly, "I see it every day. I need a break. A breath of air. A few days of just normal life." She was silent for a long time before answering. "You want to send me to a boarding house?" "Temporarily," he added quickly. "Until I finish the project and get back on my feet. Then we can hire a caregiver, remodel the apartment." He spoke quickly, feverishly, as though afraid to stop and hear her response. She looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw such pain that he couldn't bear it. "How much more of this can I take?" he blurted out. "These procedures, these medicines, this stench. I just want to live. Do you understand? Live." She flinched, as if struck. The room was filled with a ringing silence. "Leave," she finally said, turning to the wall. "Please, leave." He left, closing the door behind him. And he didn't see how silent tears were streaming down her cheeks. By morning, his things were packed, and on Marina's nightstand was a note. "I'll stay at Cada's for a few days. Tomorrow Mom will come and arrange the move to the boarding house. I'll visit you every weekend. Forgive me, if you can. P." He didn't know that some words could never be forgiven. They lingered in the air forever, like radiation after an explosion. The Miraflores boarding house was located 40 kilometers from the city, in a former children's camp that had been converted to serve the needs of residents with disabilities, as the administration delicately phrased it. A high fence, chipped paint on the building walls, a neglected park with rusty benches, all of this spoke to the fact that the flashy name and glossy brochures were just a facade. Her room was narrow, with yellow stains on the ceiling from leaks and cracked glass in the window. It barely fit a bed and a nightstand. But the worst part was the smell, a mixture of bleach, medicine, and something else, heavy and oppressive, the smell of lost hopes and broken promises. "How are we today?" Nurse Carmen, a full woman with a perpetually tired face, rolled a cart with medicines into the room. "Time for your injection, Mariquita." "Will the doctor be here today?" Marina asked, trying to maintain what little dignity she had left. "I think these pills are causing an allergy." "The doctor comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, sweetie," Carmen said, efficiently filling a syringe. "You'll have to wait until the day after tomorrow." "But I have a rash, look." Marina pointed to the red spots that had appeared on her neck and arms. The nurse glanced at it briefly. "It's just irritation from the bedding. Everyone complains about washing with bleach. What can you do?" "Turn over, I need to give you an injection in the buttocks." Marina closed her eyes, distancing herself from yet another humiliation. Mentally, she was there, on the cliff, feeling the wind, the sun, the freedom. This method of escapism was the only thing that helped her not to completely break down. After the nurse left, struggling to reach the nightstand, she opened the drawer and took out a photograph of her and Pablo on top of a mountain, happy, embracing each other against the endless sky. It was strange how quickly things that seemed unbreakable could fall apart. How easily the words "in sickness and in health" could turn into "I'm so tired of all this. What if I really can stand again?" This thought had come to her recently, after the first encouraging words from Dr. Alejandro. She had been afraid to even think about it before, not wanting to torment herself with impossible hopes. But now, what would happen afterward? Would she return to the empty apartment? Would Pablo try to find her, someone who surely had already built a new life? Or maybe, just start with a clean slate, as if the past didn't exist. And what if I can walk but remain half disabled? Will anyone want to be by my side? The bitter irony of the situation brought a wry smile to her face. When she was completely bedridden, her dream was simply to move her toes. Now, with a faint chance for more, her fears had become more complicated and deeper. The clock on the wall read 4. If Pablo decided to come today, he'd show up within an hour. He usually came after work. However, his visits had become less frequent, first every weekend, then every 2 weeks. And the last time it had been almost 3 weeks. Probably the project, she justified him in her thoughts, although she knew the truth, he just couldn't bear to see her here, among these walls and smells. Every visit had turned into torture for both of them, forced conversations, painful pauses, awkward touches. In his eyes, she saw a mixture of guilt and relief, and she didn't know which hurt more. A little bird tapped on the cracked windowsill. Maybe this is a sign? Marina smiled sadly. Lately, she had become superstitious, clinging to small things, any hint that life might still change. Her phone vibrated with a message from Pablo. "Sorry, I won't be able to come today. Urgent project. Hope you're doing well. Hugs." Predictable. She wasn't even upset, just felt an emptiness, as if something inside had finally snapped. This strange numbness scared her more than anger or despair. It was as if she was slowly stopping feeling not just her body, but her soul too. "Marina?" A concerned face peeked through the slightly open door. "Can I come in?" "Catalina." Marina tensed, involuntarily gripping the photo in her hand. "Come in," she replied, trying to keep her tone steady. She didn't want to show how crushed she was by the betrayal she had just witnessed. Pride was the last thing she had left. Catalina stepped into the room, hesitated at the door. In her hands was a bag with fruits and books. Her eyes nervously scanned the shabby surroundings, stopping at the cracked glass. "Oh my God, Marina," she began, but stopped herself. "I didn't know it was like this." "Not what the brochures promised," Marina smiled bitterly. "Welcome to reality." Catalina took a few steps forward and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked exhausted, her pale face, dark circles under her eyes, trembling hands. "I can't stay with him," she suddenly said. "Every time he touches me, I think of you, here. It's like a nightmare I can't wake up from." Marina looked at her former friend, not knowing what to feel. Hate? Sympathy? Pity? So many emotions mixed together that in the end, there was nothing left but exhaustion. Why are you telling me this? She asked. To get forgiveness for your sins? I want to help. Catalina's eyes filled with tears. I want to get you out of here. And where will you take me? Marina said bitterly. To your home, where my husband will spend his evenings. I've thought everything through, Catalina spoke quickly. I have savings. We'll find a decent clinic, real doctors. I'll end my relationship with Pablo. This is all a mistake, a terrible mistake. Marina looked at her for a long time before answering. It's already too late, Kata. For all of us. Please, let me at least try to fix what I've done. Catalina took her limp hand. I'll never forgive myself for this betrayal. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and a strange male figure appeared in the doorway, a young man in a worn sweater with attentive gray eyes and a mop of dark hair. Sorry, I'm interrupting. He began to step back. I'll come back later. No, come in, Marina unexpectedly said. We're almost done. The man entered, extending his hand first to Catalina, then to Marina. Alejandro Medina, neurorehabilitation specialist. I joined the staff here last Friday. A doctor? A real doctor? Marina asked in disbelief. The real deal, he smiled. With a PhD and publications in international journals. I don't quite fit in with the local landscape, do I? Something in his direct, open gaze made Marina smile for the first time in a long while. I've read your file, Dr. Alejandro continued. It seems there are a few key rehabilitation directions missing. If you'll allow me, I'd like to conduct an additional examination and adjust the treatment plan. Why? Marina asked tiredly. What's the point? Why shouldn't there be one? The doctor answered with a question. A compression injury to the spine at the Th8-Th9 level with partial spinal cord damage is serious, but not a death sentence. I've worked with similar cases. Catalina, who had been watching this exchange, suddenly perked up. You really think there's something we can still do? I don't make empty promises, Alejandro replied seriously, but in similar cases, I've seen both partial and significant recovery of mobility. It all depends on many factors: the nature of the injury, the time since the trauma, the regularity of rehabilitation activities, and, of course, the patient's willingness. He said the last part looking directly at Marina, and in his gaze, there was no pity, no condescension, only professional interest in something else, something intangible that made her heart beat a little faster. I have the will, she said softly. But I don't have the means. This boarding house. I'll take care of that, Catalina said suddenly, firmly. I promise. Pablo didn't fall asleep until morning. Another nightmare, Marina looking at him with despair and reproach, him trying to explain, to justify, but unable to speak a word. He woke up in a cold sweat, with his heart pounding wildly. Catalina was peacefully sleeping beside him, curled up on his shoulder. Strange, he had moved in with her thinking he'd dive into a new relationship, that the feeling of freedom and passion would help him forget the guilt. But it turned out differently. Every day, the irrepressible alienation grew. He kept returning to his thoughts about Marina, left behind in that dreadful place. Gently extricating his shoulder so as not to wake Catalina, he got up and walked to the kitchen. Catalina's apartment was small, but stylishly decorated, a studio that seemed alien and uncomfortable to him, despite all her attempts to create their shared space. Habitually checking his phone for emails, he frowned, seeing another letter from the boarding house administration. Dear Mr. Pablo, this is a reminder that payment for the upcoming month is due by the 15th. If the payment is delayed, we will be forced to. It made him feel nauseous. How many more months, years, would he pay not to look his wife in the eye? How many more nightmares would he endure? And why, damn it, had this path, which had seemed so right, so necessary, led him to even greater despair? The sound of an incoming message interrupted his thoughts. His mother. Good morning, son. How are you? Shall we have lunch together today? Dolores was the only one who genuinely rejoiced at his new life with Catalina. They often had lunch together, and his mother had already begun to cautiously bring up the topic of divorce from Marina when the appropriate amount of time had passed, of course. Her plan stretched to marriage with Catalina and future grandchildren. It seemed as though she had already completely erased Marina from their lives. "I can't today, sorry. I have a lot of work," he replied. The truth was, he was consciously avoiding his mother. Her triumphant look, her talk about a finally normal life, filled him with a dull irritation. Dolores had gotten what she wanted, but it hadn't brought happiness to anyone. The phone rang almost immediately. His mother never knew how to wait. "Pablito, are you avoiding me?" Her voice sounded concerned but with the usual authoritative tones. "This is the third time you've turned me down." "I really have a lot of work, Mom. I visited Catalina yesterday, but you weren't there," she casually remarked. "She said you often stay late. Everything okay?" Dolores's typical way of not asking directly but gently probing. Something told Pablo that his mother wouldn't approve of any new doubts or guilty feelings. "Yes, everything's fine," he lied. "The project is nearing completion. I need to focus." "I thought we could discuss your future plans," her voice took on a more persistent tone. "Divorce papers, for example. I've spoken to a good lawyer." "Mom, please," he felt a wave of irritation rise inside. "Let's not talk about this now." "When, Pablito?" Now, she almost didn't hide her displeasure. "You're acting like you've committed a crime. But you've just done what 90% of men would do in your place. This thing with Catalina, it's a perfectly normal development. Thing." It was amazing how one word could so perfectly describe what had happened between him and Catalina. Not love, not a relationship, but simply a fling, a temporary distraction built on escaping from reality. "Did you already get up?" Catalina appeared in the kitchen doorway, wrapped in his shirt. "I thought you'd sleep in, it's Saturday." "I couldn't sleep," he tried to smile. "Sorry, did I wake you?" "No, just cold without you." She came over, hugged him from behind. "Are you okay?" "Yes, just thinking about the project," he lied, avoiding her gaze. "The deadline is tight." They both knew it wasn't true. A wall of unspoken things was growing between them. Every time the phone rang for Catalina, she would step into another room. Every time Pablo saw an incoming call from the boarding house, he would hang up and turn off the sound. They were living in a closed circle of mutual deception. "I'll go out of town today," Catalina suddenly said, pretending to be busy making coffee. "To a friend's. It's her birthday." Of course, Pablo nodded. He had noticed her frequent trips to friends but hadn't asked any questions. Maybe she too was looking for a break from their strange relationship. "What time will you be back?" "Late, probably." "Don't wait for me." When she left, dressed too nicely for a casual hangout with friends, he felt not jealousy, but relief. A few hours of silence, when he didn't have to pretend, didn't have to play the role of the happy, liberated man. At work, the only place where he still felt in his element, things were going well. The hotel complex project was almost finished, the management appreciated his efforts, new opportunities were emerging. But strangely, he no longer felt the same satisfaction from his work. It was as if, together with Marina, he had lost a part of himself, the part that could rejoice in achievements and make plans. In the evening, when it got dark, he got in his car and drove wherever his eyes led him. Along the night streets, past the sleeping outskirts, to the highway leading out of town. He didn't notice how he ended up on a familiar turn. The high fence of the Miraflores boarding house loomed ahead, a dark silhouette in the night. He hadn't been here for almost a month. He had called the administrator, inquired about Marina's condition, paid the bills, but hadn't found the strength to come and look her in the eyes. A coward. The gatekeeper waved indifferently. "It's late already, I won't let you in. Visiting hours are until 6. "I'm the husband of the patient, Marina Lopez." Pablo handed over his passport. "Please, this is important." The 50 peso note tucked in the passport decided the outcome. Only for a short time, the guard muttered. And don't go through the main entrance, there are cameras. Walk around the side, the door is open. Pablo walked down the dark corridor, feeling his heart pounding in his throat. The smell of bleach and medicine, the yellowing walls, the dim lights, everything made him feel disgusted and ashamed. This was the place he had sent Marina to, abandoning her to fate. He was almost at her room when he heard strange sounds from the side corridor. Laughter? Here? Intrigued, he cautiously peered through the doorframe and froze in surprise. In the small physiotherapy room, under the light of a single lamp, Marina sat in a wheelchair. And across from her, crouching, was a stranger, holding her hands in his. They were talking animatedly, and Marina had a lively, genuine smile on her face, a smile Pablo hadn't seen in many months. "You did it," the man said enthusiastically. "See? This movement already shows progress. A few more weeks of these exercises, and we'll try more complicated ones." "I can't believe it," Marina's voice sounded excited. "They told me I would never." "Forget what they told you," the man gently placed her hand back on the armrest. "Everybody is unique. In your case, there are all the signs of partial recovery in the lower limbs." Pablo's breath caught. Recovery? Mobility? But all the doctors had told him Marina would never get out of the wheelchair. "Dr. Alejandro, you're giving me hope," Marina quietly said. "You know, the scariest thing isn't the pain, the helplessness, but the lack of hope. When you don't expect anything from the future, time itself becomes a torture." "Just call me Alejandro," the man smiled. "And remember, as long as a person breathes, there is always hope. Now, I think that's enough for today's exercises. Let's get you back to your room before the night shift catches us. Those old witches won't like me giving extra sessions." They moved toward the exit, and Pablo barely managed to duck into the shadow. His heart was racing. Dr. Alejandro, this was the neurorehabilitation specialist from the brochure. But why was he secretly working with Marina at night? And why was his wife laughing with this stranger when, next to him, Pablo could only see her crying? He quickly left the building, not daring to enter Marina's room. His mind was in chaos. On one hand, part of him was happy for her. If there was truly hope for recovery, that was wonderful. But the darker part of him felt a strange mix of jealousy and fear. What if Marina could walk again? What then? Could she forgive his betrayal? And did he even want to return to his former life? Already in the car, he pulled out his phone and opened the boarding house's website. In the staff section, he found a photo: Alejandro Medina, medical doctor, neurorehabilitation specialist, author of Methods for Restoring Motor Functions After Compression Spinal Injuries. A handsome, open face, attentive eyes, calm confidence. The complete opposite of the exhausted, confused Pablo. At that moment, a message from Catalina appeared, running late. "I'll be home late." He frowned at the screen. Coincidence, or is Catalina involved in this too? A vague suspicion made him check the navigator on her forgotten tablet, left on the coffee table. The route history clearly pointed to regular trips toward the boarding house over the past 3 weeks, although the final destination was always listed as a countryside club, a small cafe 2 kilometers from Miraflores. It was strange how easily the castles built on the sand of others' suffering could collapse. The modern Renaissance Rehabilitation Clinic was drastically different from the Miraflores boarding house. Bright and spacious rooms with panoramic windows, the latest equipment, friendly staff, everything indicated that this place was created for healing, not for the hopeless survival of patients. Pablo nervously gripped the white lilies in his hands, standing at the glass doors of the main entrance. Taking a step forward felt impossible. Almost a year had passed since he uttered those horrible words, but time had not dulled his guilt. It had only transformed from sharp, unbearable pain into a constant, aching weight, one he had learned to live with. "Can I help you?" the receptionist at the counter asked. "I'm looking for a patient." "A former patient," he began hesitantly. "Marina Lopez. I was told she's undergoing rehabilitation here." The young woman looked at him with sympathy. I can't provide patient information. But you can speak with Dr. Medina. He's with a patient right now, but you can wait in the lobby. Tea? Coffee? No, thank you. Pablo sank into a chair, placing the flowers on his lap. Outside the clinic's huge windows, the well-kept park stretched out, with green lawns, flower beds, and convenient walking paths. Several patients moved along them, some in wheelchairs, some using walkers, others walking unsteadily, as if learning to walk again. Just a couple of months ago, Marina had been among them. After that night when Pablo had secretly seen her working with Dr. Alejandro, he had not dared to go inside. Returning home, he found Catalina packing her things. You were at the boarding house, she said affirmatively. Did you see her? No, he shook his head. I only saw her working with some doctor. With Alejandro, Catalina nodded. He's a good specialist. Did you know? His voice trembled. All this time? She looked him directly in the eyes. I helped transfer her to a proper clinic. Miraflores is an awful place. How could you send her there? That question had haunted him for the past 9 months. How could he have? What had happened to the man who swore to love her in sickness and in health? Where had the Pablo gone, the one who would have moved mountains for his beloved? Catalina left the next day. Not for another man, just left. She said their relationship had been a mistake from the start, built on betrayal and guilt, and she didn't want to wake up every morning knowing she had taken her best friend's husband. He tried to contact Marina, but her phone was turned off. At the new clinic she was transferred to, they politely but firmly refused to give him any information. The patient asked not to disclose any details, they told him. So, Pablo hired a private investigator just to make sure she was okay. The report was brief. Marina Lopez is undergoing intensive rehabilitation at the Renacer Clinic. Prognosis is positive. No further information can be provided due to confidentiality. All he wanted was to make sure she was okay. And now, almost a year later, he finally gathered the courage to come. Not to ask for forgiveness, he didn't deserve it. Just to see her. And maybe understand if anything could be fixed. Mr. Pablo, a calm male voice said. My name is Alejandro Medina. Please follow me to my office. Dr. Medina was exactly as Pablo remembered him, tall, with attentive gray eyes and a mop of dark hair, slightly touched with gray at the temples. But now, instead of a worn sweater, he wore a white coat with the clinic's logo. The doctor's office was a bright room with minimalist decor, a desk, medical diplomas on the walls, and what stood out, framed photos of smiling patients. Before and after, success stories of Dr. Medina. I knew you'd show up sooner or later, Dr. Alejandro said, gesturing to the chair. Marina warned me about this. Pablo swallowed hard. How is she? The doctor looked at him intently, as if assessing whether he deserved an honest answer. Medically speaking, much better than we could have hoped, he finally said. The damage wasn't as extensive as the initial exams suggested. Plus, her sports background, willpower, and the right rehabilitation program, he paused, she can walk, Mr. Pablo. With some limitations, but she can walk. Pablo's heart skipped a beat. That's wonderful, he managed to say. Can I see her? Why? Alejandro asked bluntly. To ease your conscience? Or do you really want to go back to the wife you abandoned at the hardest moment of her life? Pablo flinched at the straightforwardness of the question. There was no aggression in the doctor's voice, just genuine interest and, perhaps, concern. I don't know, he answered honestly. I just want to see her. At least once. Alejandro thoughtfully tapped his fingers on the desk. She's in the park. She's holding a session with a kids group on the climbing wall. On the climbing wall? Pablo couldn't believe his ears. But how? She's not climbing herself, of course, the doctor smiled slightly. But she's an excellent instructor. We have a sports-based rehabilitation program. Marina turned out to be not only a great patient but also a fantastic volunteer instructor. Pablo looked at him in disbelief. When we first met, Alejandro continued, she was broken. Not so much physically, but emotionally. Do you know what's the scariest thing for someone used to controlling their body? Helplessness. And for someone who trusted their loved ones? Betrayal. Pablo lowered his head. I won't judge you, the doctor said calmly. I know how difficult it can be for those who care for paralyzed patients. But you have to understand, everything Marina has achieved this year, she did it not because of you, but despite what you did to her. I understand, Pablo whispered. Then go, Alejandro nodded toward the window. She's at the small climbing wall behind the main building. As Pablo stepped outside the building, he didn't immediately notice the small group of people by the artificial climbing wall, about 3 meters high. A few kids, aged 8 to 12, with the help of instructors, were attempting the simplest route. Cheerful exclamations, encouraging words, laughter. And then he saw her. Marina was sitting in a special chair adapted for people with limited mobility. A cane was nearby, meaning she could really walk. Her hair had grown out, but she kept the short haircut that always suited her. She wore a bright sports t-shirt, a whistle, and a stopwatch around her neck. Great, Marcos, she encouraged a light-haired boy who was hesitantly pulling himself up by his arms. Look at the next hold, not down. Her voice sounded strong and confident, completely different from the last months of their life together, when every word had been a struggle, as if speaking took all her strength. Pablo didn't dare approach any closer. He stood at a distance, holding the now slightly wilted lilies in his hands, watching every movement, every gesture of Marina. She looked alive, real. The way she had been before the injury. At that moment, one of the kids noticed him. Uncle, are you going to climb too? We have an instructor. Marina turned, and their eyes met. Time seemed to stop. He saw how her eyes widened, how her lips trembled. But there was no shock, no panic, no hatred, just a slight surprise and something like resignation, as if she had been waiting for this meeting for a long time and had prepared for it. Guys, let's take a short break, she said to the children without looking away from Pablo. Marcos, work with Andres for now. She carefully got up from the chair, leaning on her cane. He wanted to rush to her, support her, but something stopped him, the realization that she no longer needed his help. Her movements were slow but confident, as if each step had special value. She approached him herself, stopping at arm's length. Hello, Pablo, her voice was calm. Marina, he held out the flowers, not knowing what else to say. She didn't take the bouquet. Why did you come? I wanted to see how you're doing. He lowered his hand with the flowers. I heard that you're better. I'm fine, she nodded, as you can see. Behind her, the class continued. Children were climbing the artificial rock, the instructors encouraging them, and laughter and triumphant exclamations filled the air. You look amazing, Pablo said sincerely. I didn't think that I'd be able to stand again, she finished his sentence. Neither did I. But it turns out I'm stronger than anyone thought. An awkward pause. I saw Dr. Medina, Pablo began. He said you're working here as a volunteer. And not just that, a slight smile appeared on her lips. I'm taking rehabilitation therapist courses. I'll work with patients like I once was. That's amazing. He didn't know where to put his hands with the flowers. Marina, No, she shook her head, no apologies. Not now, not here. He saw how tired she was from standing. A slight tremor ran through her body, but she stubbornly remained standing, as if proving to herself and him that she could. All right, he nodded. But maybe we could talk, somewhere else, at another time. She looked somewhere past his shoulder. Pablo turned around and saw Dr. Medina approaching with 2 cups of coffee. You have a visitor? Dr. Alejandro said, handing 1 cup to Marina. Is everything all right? Yes, she smiled slightly. Alejandro, this is Pablo, my ex-husband. Ex-husband. That word hit harder than he expected. We've already met. Dr. Alejandro extended his hand, and Pablo shook it automatically. Marina, you should sit down. You've been standing longer than recommended. I'm fine, she said stubbornly, but Pablo noticed how her hand tightened around the cane. Marina, Dr. Alejandro's voice held soft insistence, as if they'd discussed her stubbornness before. We agreed. She sighed and allowed him to wheel the chair toward her. Okay, doctor, you win. In that brief exchange, Pablo caught what he had feared but subconsciously expected, a special bond between them, something only they understood. The doctor cared for her not just as a physician, there was something more in his eyes. How's your mom? Marina suddenly asked, settling into the chair. Fine, Pablo answered absently. Still as active as ever. Give her my regards. Her voice was calm, without sarcasm, only the calmness of someone who had left their grudges in the past. How's your work? Did you finish that project? Yes, he nodded, surprised by her interest. It's going well. And you? How long have you been working here? 3 months, Marina grimaced slightly. Sorry, but I need to get back to the kids. We only have an hour for this session. Of course, he said quickly, searching for words to say goodbye. Can I? Can I come again? I'd like to. Pablo, she interrupted him quietly but firmly. I don't know. I need to think about it. Is that all right? At that moment, a little boy ran up to them. Marina, look, I made it to the end, he proudly showed his scratched palms. Good job, Diego, she smiled, and the smile was real. Let's go, show me that route. Dr. Alejandro glanced at Pablo. I'll walk you out. They walked through the park in silence. Out of the corner of his eye, Pablo noticed a familiar figure sitting on one of the benches. Catalina was sitting there, watching what was happening. She was in a white medical coat with the clinic's badge, so she must have been working there. When she caught his eye, she didn't turn away but calmly nodded, as if confirming her presence. Now everything made sense. Catalina hadn't just helped Marina escape the horrible boarding house, she had seemingly changed her life, possibly becoming a volunteer or even an employee at the rehabilitation center. There was no embarrassment or guilt in her gaze, only quiet determination from someone who had found a way to make up for her mistake. Pablo hesitated for a second, not knowing whether to approach her, but his intuition told him it wasn't the right time. Maybe later they would talk. He nodded at her in return and continued his way with Dr. Alejandro. Is she really okay? Pablo asked the doctor when they reached the clinic's gates. Is she physically okay? Yes, considering the nature of the injury, Dr. Alejandro said calmly, professionally. Full recovery is impossible, but she can walk with support, sit without discomfort, take care of herself. Psychologically? Yes, too. She's come a long way from despair to acceptance and new goals. Are you with her? Pablo couldn't bring himself to finish the question. Together? Dr. Alejandro looked him directly in the eyes. Yes, a simple, honest answer, without defiance or triumph. And you? Are you happy? We're learning to be happy. The doctor looked thoughtfully at the clinic. You know, sometimes the strongest partnerships are born from overcoming difficulties together. We both understand the value of each day, each small victory. Pablo didn't know what to say. Inside, he felt a strange mix of relief that Marina wasn't alone, and bitterness that this happened without him. At the end of the month, she has an important day, Dr. Alejandro suddenly said. Her first solo completion of the obstacle course she designed for the rehab program. If you want, come. I think it would mean a lot to her to have the support of everyone who's been with her on this journey, even those who were there at the start. He handed Pablo a business card with the date and time. Thank you. Pablo took the card, not sure if he would find the strength to come. And take care of her, all right? Of course, Dr. Alejandro nodded. Although, to be honest, it's more her taking care of me. The drive back to the city felt strange, as if Pablo had been to another planet. The hustle and bustle, the noise, the people rushing to their affairs, everything seemed foreign and unreal after what he had seen at the clinic. He parked near a small square and sat for a long time, watching the playing children and young mothers with strollers. Life went on for everyone. For Marina. For Alejandro. For Catalina, who had found her path through helping others. Even for his mother, who, disappointed by the failed plan with Catalina, had started to talk more and more about other worthy girls. For everyone except him. Pablo felt like he was stuck in time at the moment when he said those terrible words. "How sick of all this I am," a phrase that set off a chain of events that couldn't be undone. He pulled out his phone and dialed the architecture firm's number. "Hello, this is Architect Lopez. Regarding the Children's Rehabilitation Center project." "Yes, I'm ready to take it on. When can we meet to discuss the details?" A small step. A tiny movement forward. Perhaps the path to forgiveness isn't in words but in deeds. He couldn't change the past, but he could try to create something meaningful for the future. For the children Marina had taught, for the patients Alejandro worked with. That evening, when he returned to the empty apartment, Pablo found an envelope without a return address in the mailbox. Inside was a key and a note with an address. Recognizing Catalina's handwriting, he couldn't understand what it meant. The phone rang. His mother again. The third time that day. "Yes, Mom," he answered tiredly. "Where have you been?" "I've been calling since morning." Dolores's voice sounded both worried and irritated. "I was busy," he answered evasively, not wanting to mention his visit to the clinic. "I've arranged a meeting with Veronica Morales, remember, my colleague's daughter? She's a lawyer, smart, and most importantly, no extreme hobbies. A great match for you." Pablo closed his eyes, feeling the growing headache. After Catalina left, his mother was back to her old ways, persistently trying to set up his personal life as if the previous attempt hadn't turned into a catastrophe. "Mom, I saw Marina today," the words came out on their own. A ringing silence followed. "Why?" she finally asked coldly. "What could you possibly have in common with her, with your ex-wife?" "She's not an ex, Mom. We're still married." Formality, Dolores waved her hand dismissively. "That can be fixed. But why stir up the past? You're finally free, starting a new life." "No, Mom," Pablo interrupted her firmly, "I'm not free. And I didn't start a new life. I made a mistake. And I'm trying to live with it." "What mistake?" Her voice took on a steely tone. "You did the sensible thing. Or do you think you should have spent your life taking care of a disabled person?" At that moment, something finally broke between them. Pablo realized that his mother would never change, never acknowledge her role in what had happened. For her, it would always be the right decision, and Marina would forever remain the unsuitable wife. "You know, I realized something today," he said slowly. "Marina was able to forgive and move on. But we're stuck in the past, still justifying the unforgivable." "What are you talking about? What does forgiveness even mean?" Panic crept into his mother's voice. "What happened today, Pablo?" "Nothing, Mom. I just saw real strength. And it's not in you and me," he sighed. "I have to go. We'll talk later." He hung up, ignoring the immediate callback, and looked at the key in his hand. It was time to move forward. An hour later, he was standing in front of the door to a regular apartment in a residential area. He inserted the key, hesitated, opened it, and froze on the threshold. The small but bright studio was sparsely furnished, with minimal furniture, a good rehab corner with exercise equipment, wide doorways, obviously for ease of movement with limited mobility. On the coffee table was a note. "This is Marina's apartment. She doesn't know I'm giving you the key. But I believe you'll do the right thing. K." Pablo slowly sank into a chair, looking around. Along the walls were pictures of mountains, climbing gear neatly stacked in the corner, as if waiting. On the shelf were medical books and rehabilitation guides. There were no personal photos, nothing that reminded him of him or their past life. He understood what he had to do. He took the key, placed it on the table, and wrote a short note. Sorry for the intrusion. The key was with me, returning it now. You did it. I'm proud of you. P. He locked the door, dropped the key in the mailbox, and left without looking back. Some roads are not meant to be revisited. Some mistakes can't be fixed. But sometimes, very rarely, you can find a way to move forward without causing more pain to those you once betrayed. Not all wounds heal completely. But even scars are evidence that healing is possible.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.